Let's pretty much start off the presentation by, I guess, I've been in the world of college and pretty much have seen everything until this year. I think this year, this is a brand new thing for everyone, whether it be a college advisor, guidance counselor, someone at the college themselves, so on and so forth. I got the email. You guys have your questions. I'm going to go over all the different email questions you have throughout the slides. Once again, if you have any questions, just basically, I guess, just chime in, because there's really, I guess, no raising your hand here, or maybe there is. I just have no idea how to use that. Now, right off the bat, one of the things that I want to get off, I guess, start the topics off with is there's over 4,000 colleges out there, and this is going to be the most difficult year to kind of guide any student based on everything that's going on with COVID. I mean, obviously, a lot of you have heard Notre Dame, Michigan State, Chapel Hill, and now just recently a few high schools have started basically going virtual. So it's like last minute things for a lot of high schools as well as colleges. So it's one of those years where, good, bad, or indifferent, nothing is going to be normal. That being said, if you don't get accepted to the college of your choice, it's not the end of the world. In many cases, you can transfer, and transferring next year might be even easier than it's ever been before as well. You want to try to find a way to enjoy the process. Now, I know there's a lot of stuff you guys aren't able to do, like prom and God knows what else, sports, so on and so forth. So to a certain extent, yes, high school has sucked to this point in time. But one of the things I like to tell the juniors and seniors here tonight is there's basically three different groups of students. And you guys are actually in the best group, believe it or not. The first group of students you have, I guess your generation per se, let's call it that. The first group of students you have, the worst group, is actually the students who are graduating this year. And the reason that the students that are graduated this year in May are the worst is because we have somewhere between 30 and above million people unemployed in the United States, which has never happened ever. So they're going into the worst possible job market ever. Making matters even worse, these students are going to be asked to start paying back their debts sometime around Christmas, which means no jobs, student loan debt, can't pay it back. Worst group. The second worst group is the college students returning back to college because they've already experienced what college is like, and it's never going to be the same, especially not this year. So for students who are seniors in college, whether you're dorming or living off campus, it's irrelevant. It's never going to go back to the way it was. As you can imagine nowadays with, like I mentioned before, Notre Dame, Chapel Hill, a few other colleges at the last minute now electing to basically say to the students, you know, you had dorm rooms, you were doing in-class participation stuff, that's all done. Now it's all virtual. Making matters worse, the students who did elect to go and study on campus for schools that have done virtual. I know there's a pretty, I guess, popular now YouTuber from NYU who for the last 2 weeks has shown what it's been like to live at NYU under what I would basically consider prison terms, to be honest with you. They cannot leave their dorm room, they cannot have friends, they cannot travel. It's basically just a prison. And now the college life with no football, probably no basketball, no partying, students being expelled, students being suspended for having parties. It's just not going to be the same, unfortunately. So the reality is the group that we're talking to tonight, the seniors in high school that are graduating 2021 and the juniors, you're in the best case scenario. And the reason being is because no one knows what's going on and no one knows what's going to happen. So this is the year that seniors should be taking the most advantage of the situation due to the fact that there's going to be so many differences on the admission side and financial aid side that you're really looking for your biggest advantage. And one of the biggest advantage for seniors this year is getting your applications in early. And what I mean by early, I don't just mean early action or early decision. What I'm talking about is getting it in way earlier than you've ever done before, admissions wise. So let's just talk about that right off the bat for the seniors specific. When it comes to admissions, you have the different categories which you see on the screen. Obviously, early decision means you're locked in, you have to go. Then you have restricted early action, which means you get accepted, but you don't have to go. Then you have the regular early action, which means you get accepted, but you also don't have to go. And the only difference between restricted early action and regular early action is if you do restricted early action, you can't do early decision. So what I'm seeing now is early decision this year will probably be the least competition it's ever been. And a couple reasons why. Number one reason it's going to be the competition is international students are non-existent this year. You're not going to have any international student competition. Yeah. Second reason it's going to be the less competition on early decision is the fact that many students have not seen the colleges. So if I have a school, I'm not going to do early decision and lock myself in. So if you have your dream school, let's say you have a high level school, but you're just off the cusp of getting in according to, let's call it naviance. The reality is I'm still doing early decision if I love that college and I think I have a shot at it. Even if I have a barely shot at it, I'm doing early decision because it's the best case scenario to get accepted. Because what's going to happen this year is early decision applications are probably going to be down because students haven't seen the school, they haven't been able to do the SATs or ACTs, which means the regular application pools and more likely early action is going to be through the roof because of the fact that students are so unaware of what the campuses look like, the culture of the campus, the background, what the school is like, that instead of applying to the normal 8 to 10, 8 to 12 college list, you're going to have students applying to 12, 15, 16, 20 colleges because they're hoping to get accepted in the regular pool and then go visit the school in the spring, which means the regular pool is probably going to be, the competition level is going to be off the roof, like just insane. With the early decision, it's probably going to be less competitive because you have students who didn't take the SAT because either they couldn't or there was a health issue involved or there was no test available. Then you have students that, in the same scenario where if they're international students, are looking at the situation here and probably not coming. And then on top of all that, students who haven't seen the campuses are probably less likely to want to be locked in, even if it's a competitive college. So right now, if you guys are looking about early decision, and even if you look at Naviance or Power Schools or guidance is telling you, or college advisors telling you, you're probably not going to get in if you do early decision, I'm still probably doing early decision because this is the only year you're going to have a less competition level than ever before. Okay. Now for early action and early decision, most deadlines are November 1st. However, if you want to stand out this year, you should have all your applications in between September 15th and September 20th. The reason that's so important from a financial point of view and admissions point of view. First, let's talk financial. Financially speaking, there's going to be deadlines for scholarships. You do not want to be late with scholarship deadlines. Most deadlines for scholarships are typically either late November or early December for schools that have scholarship deadlines. Reason being is that schools are running out of money. They lost money in the spring because they had to refund students for housing, in some cases tuition. They lost money in the summer because they couldn't do summer courses, they couldn't do anything on campus. They're now losing money in the fall for students who are then backing out of dorm rooms because they're going virtual. So the colleges keep losing money. So what does that mean? That means they're going to be more aggressive to accept students quicker. So the earlier you get applications in, the earlier you get accepted, especially for the REACH schools. If they didn't make their numbers this year for 2021 academic year, they're going to be more aggressive and more willing to accept a student on the border, on the cusp of getting in, with the hopes that they think it get accepted, they're going to come. So the acceptance yield, the amount of students they accept, is probably going to be higher. So if you're on the cusp of getting into a college, it makes a lot more sense to be one of the first applications out there. Also on the admissions side, besides the scholarship and not being late with that, because if you're late with the scholarship deadlines this year, they're not going to care what your situation is. They're not going to give you scholarship on. That's why you want to have everything in. Those are a couple reasons. The other reason is because with everything going on and COVID and so on and so forth, what's happened is there's been essentially a shift in admissions as far as competition. Typically every year, the southern states, the Alabamas, the Kentuckys, the North Carolinas, South Carolinas, all of them, they always beat the northern states, Connecticut, PA, New Jersey, New York. They always beat us to admissions because they start school a month earlier. However, that's not going to happen this year because they opened up a month earlier and they completely blew it with COVID. And there's cases blowing up all over the South. So guidance offices are more focused on now preparing either virtual classrooms or figuring out how to mitigate the problem they have down there. So they're not looking at getting applications out with transcripts or recommendations. They're looking to fix the problem they themselves basically created by not social distancing and not making students wear masks. Now they have a huge issue down there. So now we're on the level playing field with everyone in the United States here in the Northeast. So that's why applying early, whether it's early action before it's due, early decision, or regular or rolling, ideally I would want to get everything out before September 25th. That would be my cutoff, especially for competitive colleges. You want to be in that first group of applications that come in because the best case scenario for you guys is your school gets nowhere near what they're expecting early decision candidates or early action candidates in the first week, 2 weeks, month. Then they start accepting a higher level of students as far as the amount, but maybe a lesser academic student. So that might give you on the cusp of getting in on a much better chance of getting in than you probably would ever have. Does everyone understand? Okay, good. So that was kind of like the financial, that's the admissions / financial aid scholarship side to a certain extent right now. Let's talk about the SAT, ACT situation and basically what's going on with the fact that students are not able to take the test. I've gotten maybe, 300 calls on the SAT, ACT situation in the last 6 months because every month they obviously keep canceling the tests. One of the questions obviously is if we don't do the SAT or we don't send in the SAT or ACT, how is that going to affect us as far as scholarship money? Very simple. You have to call each school individually, their admissions office, and ask them, if I'm not sending SAT, ACT scores in, will this affect me? Will this be used against me negatively for scholarship consideration? Unfortunately, it was a lot easier an answer to give you 6 months ago and further back. But with COVID, everything has changed, which basically means with COVID and everything changing, that also means that unfortunately, what's going to happen is every school is going to do these things differently. Usually in the past, if a school was SAT, ACT optional, 9 out of 10 times they did not care if you sent the scores in for scholarship consideration. That's probably not going to be the same case this year. I think it's probably going to be a 50-50 situation, especially when you're considering that that every school almost from Harvard down is now not accepting or does not need SATs or ACTs, which has never happened before. Now, Harvard and that level of school doesn't provide scholarship money, so there probably wouldn't be scholarships anyways. But for schools for a tier or 2 tiers below that typically was not an SAT, ACT optional college, this is a situation where you have to make the phone call and ask, is this going to affect my scholarship consideration if I don't send SATs or ACTs in? Now, from, I guess, a broad perspective, typically there's 3.5 to 4 million students that graduate high school every year. Now, COVID basically took hold in February. Most juniors start taking the test, the SATs, ACTs, typically around March, April, May for the first time. Usually most students take it 3 times, but the first time is usually in that March, April, May timeframe, which means there's probably somewhere between 60 to 75% of students who did not take the test. So if you didn't take the test, you're not in the minority. You're in the humongous majority, which means 2 things. Number 1, if you've taken the test and you have a good score, a median score, which means the median accepted score for that school, or you're in range of that median score or above, you probably don't need to take the SATs again or the ACTs again. If you're below that number, I probably would not send the SATs, ACTs in unless the school's already told you, because you've asked them based on my scores, am I eligible for scholarship money and am I able to get one at your college? Many schools have what's known as an index for scholarship consideration. And this is all done, by the way, through the admissions office. So when you call admissions, you can say, I did take the SATs. I have a 1250. My GPA is a 3.5 out of a 4 scale. You always want to give them your GPA out of the 4 scale because they use a 4 scale in college. Am I eligible for scholarship money? Yes or no? The admissions office can tell you over the phone, yes or no, based on scholarship money. Because most scholarship money is based on academics, GPA, and test scores. So if you give them those 2 criteria over the phone and they say, yes, you are eligible, they're not going to tell you what you're going to get. They're typically going to say to you, based on your scores and your academic profile, we typically give this scholarship in this range, which basically means you know you're already eligible. I probably would consider sending the test scores in, because if you're eligible for scholarship money and they're saying, yes, you're going to get scholarship money, you're 100% going to get into the college, because they're not going to give scholarship money to students who don't get accepted. You guys understand from an SAT, ACT point of view? Okay, good.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You make those phone calls saying, I have this GPA and this SAT, would I qualify for scholarship? That's not need-based, that's just merit-based scholarship?
Good question. Of the scholarship money provided by the admissions office, I would say that 9 out of 10 scholarships are need blind, essentially. They don't care if you have need or not. You could be a millionaire, you could be Jeff Bezos and still get a scholarship at a college, depending on if your student has the academic profile required for that scholarship. The scholarships that require a need-based component are rare, but there are some available out there. Penn State does have a few. NYU does have a few. Just to give you an idea of a couple schools in the Northeast here that do have scholarships available that have a need-based component. However, those are typically alumni-based scholarships. So scholarships set up by the alumni that basically say, we need this criteria plus a need component. Most scholarship money provided by the college, i.e. the admissions department specifically, do not have need-based components. So the financial aid forms do not need to go in for those scholarships. Think of the admissions office as essentially the marketing arm of the college. They're there to answer any question you have of them that they have an answer to. Scholarship money, whether I should do early decision or early action, whether it matters if I do regular, you can ask them any questions of admissions, and specifically the scholarship money, because they're very open about that, because most of them have an index. So either you have the index requirements or you don't. Now, if you're looking to go, or I guess find the list of schools that have gone SAT, ACT optional, which I think now is hovering somewhere around 1,500, if not 1,600 schools at this point in time. We actually have the website on the screen now. It's called fairtest.org. This is the place you need to go to. This is actually the website and what it actually looks like. You essentially just log in here, right to the homepage, fairtest.org. You basically, the screen you see here, you just scroll down and it's in alphabetical order. You can also make it in state order on this website as well, of all the schools that are now SAT, ACT optional. I believe at this point in time, it's up to 1,500, almost 1,600 colleges, SAT, ACT optional. So it's not a bad situation to be going SAT, ACT optional. And another thing that's good about the seniors this year, another positive for you guys, I know there's not many out there, but based on the fact that they've lowered the bar, and what I mean by lowered the bar, I mean basically they have taken away a barrier for certain students to apply to high-level schools. What I mean by that is, let's say you've taken 6, 7 APs. You've done very well in your AP courses, or you have a good IB track, so you're looking at high-level courses, but you test very badly. This is the perfect year year for you because you don't have to send in test scores. When Harvard says you don't have to send in test scores, but you have a good rigor, you have a good GPA, this is the best beneficial situation you can be in if you're a bad test taker. Because now that barrier to applying to a high-level school like a Harvard, a Columbia, a Yale is now taken away. So if you have a good rigor, good amount of classes at the high level, dual credit courses, AP, IB, etc., and you also have a good GPA, this opens up the doors that probably would not have been opened if this did not happen. So you have to look for your benefits. There are a lot of negatives, but as a senior student, you have a lot more benefits than you know. Now, that being said, let's talk about the 3 different sources of scholarships, because this is one of the questions that was asked of the parents here tonight for, I guess, today's presentation. When it comes to scholarships, there's technically 3 different sources, 3 different levels of scholarships. And when it comes to scholarships, the first level you're going to deal with is the admissions office, the college themselves. Now, the college provides scholarships based on basically 2 sources of funding. Either the endowment, which is already there set up, or money given to the school through alumni, which also goes into endowment, by the way. But if the school just gets money from a fundraiser, and it goes into the endowment, this is what I was talking about before of scholarship money that they provide. So there's less restrictions. There's typically no need-based restrictions. There's just the requirement of the GPA and test scores, or GPA and certain classes taken scenario. Now, when it comes to the endowment money, some alumni like to say to them, we're going to give you a bunch of money for scholarship consideration. However, we have our own criteria you want to follow as well. So for scholarships, you want to call the admissions office, because now it's difficult, almost not impossible to get a hold of somebody face-to-face, obviously, and ask them. Number 1, am I eligible for scholarship money based on my GPA, my classes taken, my test scores, or not sending my test scores scenario? That's the first question you want to ask admissions, to try to figure out, can we start getting scholarship money to start reducing the cost right off the bat? The second question you want to ask admissions outside of the academic profile scenario is, I'm looking to take this major. I've done this for community service. I've done this for volunteer work. This is my leadership stuff. I'm going to send you a copy of my resume. Is there any other scholarships in addition to the academic scholarships at your college? Because there's going to be some colleges out there that provide you scholarships, being a woman going into engineering, a male going into nursing, or if you're a first-generation student, or if you come from New Jersey. There's scholarships out there, in some cases from some universities, set up by alumni, that have certain criteria that you might fall into. So obviously you want to ask the admissions office, based on my resume, or based on my grades, or based on anything you see about myself as a student, is there anything else I should be doing? To give you an example, Villanova has a scholarship. It's called a presidential scholarship. Now, Villanova does not give out very many presidential scholarships. They give out anywhere between 25 to usually 30 presidential scholarships. However, it's not like getting the other scholarships somewhere else where if you have the GPA, you have the test scores, all you have to do is apply to the college and they give you a scholarship. At Villanova, you must first apply, get accepted, then fill out additional paperwork for the presidential scholarship. Now, it's based on a board of directors essentially reviewing the applications coming in for the presidential scholarship. But if you didn't know that and you just applied to Villanova and you just assumed they didn't have a scholarship because they didn't offer you one and you were a top-level student, you would be incorrect. And you'd be very incorrect in the sense that the presidential scholarship at Villanova, even though it's limited, it's a full scholarship, which means you could have had your entire academics, all 4 years covered, if you're one of the people selected for the presidential scholarship. But if you didn't ask admissions about any other scholarship information they have available and you never applied, you never would have won.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
So when you're contacting the admissions office about the scholarships that are available based on your GPA and things like this, does it matter if it is the parent contacting the admissions office or the student contacting the admissions office? Should I have the kids do that themselves, or should I make that call?
Good question. When you're calling about scholarships specifically, it can be either person, because what's going to happen is the person who answers the phone is going to answer your questions because they already know these questions are coming. So more than likely you're talking to a work study student or an administrative person. They may pass you on to a counselor, but it's probably not even your counselor. It's just somebody who's on call. So either parent or student, it won't matter. However, if it's going to be something more specific about the application or about the essay or questions about the college themselves, it should always be the student calling. Now, the second level of scholarship money is the easiest to apply for, but it's the hardest to get. It's the outside scholarships. And the 2 biggest groups out there are fastweb.com and FinAid. You can technically start applying to scholarships as early as 8th grade. So there's never too early, and you can never get too late because they also have scholarships out there available for PhD students. So 8th grade to PhD. So anywhere in that time frame, you can go on either one of these 2 websites, and these are the 2 largest websites websites available for scholarship searches. That's why we have these two. You also have Scholly. Scholly's very good. You have meritaid.com is very good. You have scholarships.com is very good. You have capx.com is very good. So there's a bunch of them out there, but the reality is these are the two largest, and these basically encompass all the other scholarships I just mentioned. Okay, but this is also the heaviest competition because everyone's going to be applying to the Coca-Cola scholarship, the Pepsi scholarship. The big ones. They're all going to be applying. So the competition is going to be off the charts. I usually tell students that the best way to handle the scholarship stuff is first take care of the admission stuff. See what the college offers you based on your academics. Then start focusing in on the scholarships on the private side from the FastWeb, the FinAid, and then focus in on the last section, which is the high school you're coming from. Your high school will also have typically put on the Naviance system a list of local scholarships. These will have the least amount of competition. These obviously won't be as big as a Coca-Cola scholarship, but it's going to have the least amount of competition, as well as on top of the least amount of competition, it's going to be the easiest to apply to because of the fact that in your high school, I've been doing this 20 years, most of the high schools I see give out local scholarships, whether from the PTA, the Elks Club, the Realtors, etc. Most people that apply to these will range from 1 to 5 applicants who apply to these scholarships. So competition-wise, it's very low. The numbers as far as the amount they give out in scholarships typically range from 250 to 500 to around 3 to 4,000 I've seen on the high end. I did once see a student receive a $100,000 local scholarship, but it's extremely rare, okay? In 22 years, I've seen it happen once, so it's not going to happen very often. But the benefit of local scholarships is, number one, easiest to get, least competition, and number two, since it's the least competition, you can stack up these scholarships. I usually see the same 5, 6, 7 students win everything, which means if you have 30 scholarships and you have one student win 10 of them, and on average it's $1,000 per scholarship, that's $10,000 that student just won. Just by, in some cases, writing the same essay over and over again, or I guess copying the same essay onto an application for local scholarships. So always contact your guidance office and ask them. You can even ask them now, when is the local scholarship list going to come out? So I know what's available for us to be able to apply to. Because the best ones you can get, or the easiest ones you can get, are the college one, because you're either going to get it or you're not. There's not much work to be done. Second easiest level is the high school, because the least amount of competition there. And then the third level of scholarships is the scholarships online. The most competition out there, but also the most amount of scholarships out there. Now, I typically go college first, then start signing up for the FastWeb, FinAid stuff, usually around January. Then I start working with the high school stuff, because that's typically when the high school stuff starts coming out as well. So kind of in conjunction, the online stuff with the high school stuff is the way I'm doing the scholarship stuff. Okay? Now,
just to mention, because a lot of these girls are Gold Award winners, you guys are really eligible for a lot of the local and the high school ones, because the high school really, has a lot of things for even community service, anything, because you have so many years in Girl Scouts. The other thing to mention is you were talking about like a Villanova and that President's Award. We all have these conferences coming up with our senior counselors. Make sure when you go to these, you have your list of schools, and usually the counselors will know about those particular ones that are real game changers. So make sure when you go in, you say, okay, Villanova is on my list. Is there anything out there I should look into? And usually they'll point you in the right direction. The last thing to mention is I did do the FastWeb thing. Just wanted to ask you, Ed, I mean, I get emails every day about all these different scholarships. Is it like some of them you feel like they're a scam?
I'm not gonna lie to you. Whether you do CapX or FastWeb or FinAid or Scholly or any of them, they're all gonna spam you. So what I typically tell parents to do is set up like a Gmail account, like a College 2020 account, Gmail, and then just go in there. And then the benefit of what I like about both FastWeb and FinAid, it allows you to filter a lot of stuff. So the benefit of the filter is you can either do it by date or amount or essay requirements, that kind of stuff. So you can kind of, I guess, reduce the spam. But I typically say set up a different account just for that. You can use that too for everything, for the Common App, for everything. But I usually say set up a Gmail account, so then that way you're not inundated all day long. And then a kind of a fourth level of scholarship that some people don't kind of consider, some guidance counselors realize but don't, is there's certain schools that provide you in-state tuition if you hit a certain SAT score. Maryland's done this. South Carolina does this. There's a lot of schools out there, if you hit a certain SAT score, they provide you in-state tuition. South Carolina actually provides you in-state tuition if you hit a 1350. Ohio State is very big on this too. Typically, when you're a 1350 and above out-of-state student, they reduce your cost by giving you a scholarship of anywhere from $20,000 to $25,000 off. Now, if you're looking at these kind of colleges that have in the past provided scholarships of basically in-state tuition for hitting a certain SAT or ACT mark, one of my questions of asking admissions is, I have a great GPA, I have a lot of APs, a lot of dual credit courses, a great rigor to my schedule. individual. I was barred from taking the SAT because they kept canceling it. Am I eligible for in-state tuition? That's one of the questions I would be asking. That's what I'm saying. For seniors, there's a lot of benefits here if you ask questions, because there's going to be schools out there going to say, you know what, if we have a student that took a lot of APs, has a lot of rigor, has a great GPA, and the only fault of them not getting the in-state scholarship is they can't take the SAT, they might give it to you. These are the questions you want to ask admissions, because to give you a guideline, I was a financial aid director for about 15 years, okay? When it comes to the budgets at the college, the admissions office can go crazy and go way over budget with scholarship money. But financial aid, the minute they go $1 over the budget for the year, it's basically you're in trouble. So for me, if I know admissions, it has more leeway to give me money, I'm trying to focus on every aspect I can to try to get scholarship money from them. And if I know they've done in-state tuition for a student like me and I have the GPA requirement, but what I don't have is a test score, I'm going in there and I'm basically saying over the phone call or through an email, look, if I took the test, I probably would have got it. I have X amount of APs, I have a great GPA. According to your scale, I would have got it last year if I took the test, but I've been barred from taking the test. I don't believe that I should be, basically negatively impacted because the SATs and ATTs had just basically screwed this whole thing up. I want to know what can be done to benefit me for the work I've done over 4 years, from the classes I've taken, from the GPA I've accomplished over 4 years. I don't believe I should be basically negatively impacted because I can't take a 4-hour test.
I had a question on that. This is Dan Persky. If I believe a lot of the schools give that number in with the admissions, right? So if you've got at Maryland or Ohio State that 1350 and you get an admissions letter, they normally automatically award you a certain amount and tell you right away. So if you're going to do what you're saying, call them. Do you need to do it ahead of being admitted so that they'll consider you, or that money could be gone, right? If they give it to people when they're admitted?
Yes and no. The reason I'm calling now is because I want to find out two things. Number one, am I even in the category of getting a scholarship? And number two, if I am in the category of getting a scholarship, can I increase that scholarship? What I mean by that is, let's say you have a 3.3 out of a 4 scale GPA. Just to give you an idea, 3.3 out of a 4 scale. And let's say you were able to take the SATs, you got 1,200. And they tell you, based on your academics, you're going to get a $5,000 scholarship. But if you had a 3.5 GPA, you would have got an extra $5,000 scholarship on top of what you're already getting. My next question would be, do you consider the first half grades of senior year? Because if you do consider it, and I have AP courses or IB track or dual credit courses or anything above basically an honors level course, I'm probably getting an extra point on my GPA based on the scale, which means I could probably hit the 3.5. So if I do well that first half, I can get that extra $5,000. If I can't get that point, I can ask them as well, do you consider if I do well senior year, the whole senior year, and get to a 3.5, would you give me the extra amount? So what you're trying to do is, in a sense, negotiate that extra money, because once scholarship money is locked in, there's no more negotiating after you go into college. So whatever you start with, that's what you start with. They can give you other scholarships in school. They do have what's known as continuing scholarships if you make the dean's list, but they will not increase what you already have. So your goal is always to find some way to get the highest amount from the starting point. That's your goal. So you're calling to find out, am I eligible? Yes or no? And if I am, can I get more? That's what you're looking to do. Now let's talk price. Now, one of the craziest things is, with everything going on, there's a handful of schools who've actually locked in their price, so they're not going to increase. But there's almost no school that's lowering the price. There's like 3 or 4 who are saying they're lowering the price. Most of them are actually increasing the price, good, bad, or indifferent. So for those of you out there looking at the sticker price and thinking, it's 80, maybe they're going to lower the price next year, they're not going to lower the price next year, because they realize, good, bad, or indifferent, whether they lose the international students, whether they go from having 100% capacity to 95, 90, 85% capacity, they would rather lose an extra 5, 10% of capacity of students applying or going there than lower the sticker price, which seems insane from a business point of view, but it's just the way it is, unfortunately. I mean, I've seen everything. The 2008 crash, the 2000 NASDAQ crash, the internet bubble. I've seen it all. And the colleges have never lowered the price. And pandemic is not going to make them lower the price. At least not from all of them perspective, lower the price. So the reality is, we're dealing with, good, bad, or indifferent, schools in the 80s, the 70s, depending on your tier of school. However, the benefit is they're not going to switch around the generosity of these colleges. So if you're looking at your college list and you're wondering, maybe my job has been reduced, maybe my income has been reduced, maybe I shouldn't be looking at applying to these schools that cost the 70s, the 80s, the $60,000 range. This is probably the worst thing you can do. What you need to do is, if the college costs $50, $60, $70, $80,000, do not automatically take it off the list. What parents need to do is they need to sit down with the students and advise them that this is the number we feel comfortable with. If the school costs $80,000, but you get it down to, let's say, $40,000, or if we can get it down to $30,000, then we feel comfortable sending you. That's the conversation you need to have. Because looking at the price tag and automatically eliminating limiting college is the worst thing you can do because you never know which colleges are generous. Of the list of schools you see on here right now, these schools are extremely generous. Most of these schools give out monies where most of the students end up paying half, in many cases less than half of the sticker price. So what you need to do right off the bat is we need to understand how financial aid works. Now, there's 4 parts of financial aid. And the reason I'm bringing up the 4 parts is because of the 4 parts, there's 2 parts that are very important. Obviously, the scholarships and grants, the free money, the stuff you're not paying back. You're trying to maximize scholarships and grants. So what that means is whether you're talking to admissions or whether you're talking to a financial aid officer at the college and you're talking about the financial aid process and receiving financial aid, you need to be specific. And this is what I mean by specific. If you call up an admissions officer or a financial aid officer and you ask them, does your school give out financial aid? They're all going to say yes, because you're being too broad. That's why I'm saying you have to be more direct. You call admissions and you say, am I eligible for scholarship money? Yes or no. Because if you ask them, am I eligible for financial aid, whether you're applying or not, whether you send an application or not, they're all going to say yes. Because the minute you fill out the FAFSA form, they give you a $5,500 federal loan. So every school employee knows if anyone asks about financial aid, the answer is yes, which means you have to be specific. Scholarship money specifically with admissions and grant money specifically with financial aid. So if you're talking to financial aid, you can ask them, generally, what does your school typically give out in grant aid, not financial aid? Because if you say financial aid, they're all going to say, yes, we give you financial aid. Does everyone understand? Okay, good. Now, when it comes to scholarship money and grants and loans and work study, what I'm assuming is going to happen this year for the seniors applying to college next year is to kind of give you a perspective of giving you more aid. I'm assuming that most colleges, not all of them, but a lot of them, are going to increase the amount of work study program money they offer you. The reason they're doing this is twofold. Number one, if you see a large work study amount on your award letter, what they're offering you to go to that college in the form of financial aid, that means number one, they're trying to, in a sense, manipulate the financial aid package by making it look like they're giving you more than they actually are. The typical financial aid package will have a work study amount of $1,000 to $2,000. That's the average. Anything above $2,000 means the college is trying to show they're offering you more aid when they're really not. Because work study means your student must first find a job on campus. So they don't provide them a job. They must find one first, then work towards those funds, then they pay them on a weekly basis. So it's not like they give you a work study program at $2,000, they take it off the bill, and then the student works. No, the student must first work, then they receive the money in the form of a check, then they can elect to use that for college or something else. It's up to them, really. That's why you're looking to maximize scholarships and grants by contacting admissions and asking them scholarship questions specifically, and contacting the financial aid office and asking them grant questions specifically. Does everyone understand? Okay, good. Now, that being said, now that we kind of understand that financial aid means 4 things and we need to focus on grants and scholarships and which department to focus on each, specifically grants and scholarships, let me explain to you how a college determines if you even have financial need to receive grant money specifically. There's basically 3 different parts when they're figuring out whether or not you should be receiving grant money from a college. Right off the bat, you have cost of attendance. Cost of attendance is the most important number you will utilize in any aspect of financial aid. I'm going to explain why in a moment. Cost of attendance basically means is that what the cost of that school is for everything included. So cost of attendance means room and board, tuition, the books, transportation to the college in the fall, and then back home in the spring if you're dorming. It means all those different costs. New student fees, technology fees, insurance fees, everything is incorporated in the cost of attendance. Now, the reason you want to use the words cost of attendance whenever you're talking about financial aid with a school is because when you're talking to a school, there's basically 2 ways to increase your financial aid eligibility. You either, 1, have to increase the cost of the school, or you have to, 2, decrease what they expect you to pay, which is the second component here, the expected family contribution, which you get by filling out the financial aid forms. So the reason you want to either increase the cost or decrease your amount you're supposed to pay towards college based on the financial aid forms is because by increasing or decreasing your amount, you're basically increasing the space available for financial aid consideration. Your goal to receive financial aid is very simple. Show them they cost more than they do, or decrease the amount they expect you to pay, which increases your space for aid. That's the best way to get more grant money. And the reason I tell you guys to always use the terms cost of attendance when you're dealing with any kind of appeal or asking for additional aid from financial aid or admissions is because the higher the cost of the school, the more space you have. Now, when it comes to cost of attendance, there's things you pay directly to the college and things you pay indirectly to the college. Direct costs are tuition and room and board. So you don't obviously, when you're talking to them, want to talk about just the tuition cost, because then you're lowering or shrinking the space for aid. Does everyone understand? Okay, good. The indirect cost are the book cost, the transportation cost, the laptop cost you have to pay to basically set up your students, the dorm costs as far as the pillows, the comforters, etc. All these extra costs are the total cost of the university, okay? So the total cost of the university minus what you're supposed to pay provide you what's known as the financial need. And the financial need is what the school is looking for to try to assist you in the college process. Now, when it comes to the expected family contribution, this number is gotten or basically created by filling out one of these two forms, in some cases, both these forms. One of the first questions you want to do, I guess one of the first places you want to make a phone call after you decide which schools you're applying to, is the financial aid offices of these different colleges. And the reason you want to call a financial aid office after you figured out what your college list is because you want to ask them, which financial aid forms do you require? Is it just the FAFSA, or do you require the CSS in addition to the FAFSA? The reason this is so important is because the FAFSA form is straightforward. The FAFSA form does not care about retirement assets. It does not care about your primary home where you live. The CSS profile does care about all those things. So the CSS is going to be more in depth. So you have to figure a CSS profile school asks more information. They're going to be more in depth. In some cases, they're going to be less generous. That being said, if you only have to fill out the FAFSA form, this is where you fill out the FAFSA form. FAFSA.ed.gov. For senior parents, you can actually now start the process of creating the FAFSA login IDs. You must obtain 2 IDs. So for senior parents, you can start that now. Both the CSS and the FAFSA form become available starting October 1st, but you can start creating the logins now. You can go to this website here, FAFSA.ed.gov. Click on the Start Here for the new students. It's going to ask you, do you have an FS Aid ID, a FAFSA ID? You're going to click on Create One. You must first create one for the student, and then second, create one for the parent. The 2 logins are used to send out the student's FAFSA form. When you do start the FAFSA in October, you start as the student, then halfway through, you log in as the parent, and then that way, you're both in the FAFSA, and that's why you need 2 logins. Does everyone understand why you need 2 logins? Okay, good. Now that being said, let's talk about, between the FAFSA form specifically, the calculation and how they figure out how much you're supposed to pay for the college. I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way up. For students, you have no asset protection, which means any money you put on the FAFSA form that you have in checking or savings, etc. Once again, on the FAFSA, retirement assets don't count. They want 20% of that to go towards the cost of college. So let's just say you have $1,000 in your checking account, which means 20% of that, $200, part 1 of the expected family contribution of the 4 parts. Part 2, students' income. Students are allowed to make up to $6,500 before $1 counts. But $1 over $6,500, they want 50 cents on the dollar. Now, when you're talking about tax years, for seniors, for senior parents, you'll be using 2019 taxes. For junior parents, you'll be using 2020 taxes, okay? Now, part 3, parents' assets. This is where it starts getting a little murky because it gets more in depth as far as the parent assets compared to the student's assets. For parents, you're giving what's known as an asset protection allowance. What that basically means is there's a certain amount of assets outside of your retirement, outside of your primary home that do not count. Assume for parents that you have an asset protection allowance of roughly $25,000. So what does that mean in layman's terms? Well, let's say all the money you have outside of retirement and outside of the value of your home, all the money you have is $20,000 in a mutual fund. That means you put that you have $20,000 in a mutual fund on the FAFSA form, but they don't count it at all towards college because you're under the $25,000 of asset protection for parents. Let's say you have $50,000 of assets in a mutual fund. You put the $50,000 on the FAFSA. They will then back out $25,000. The FAFSA will take out the protection amount for you. The remaining $25,000 will be assessed at a rate of 5.6%. So you can start seeing that student assets count a lot differently than parent assets. Now the 4th part, parents' income. It's a sliding scale. The more you make, the more they expect you to pay. Assume that most of you are going to be somewhere in that 20 to 25 range. I know it goes all the way up to 47%, but if you make $250,000, adjusted gross, by the way, is what they look at when they ask you for income. If your adjusted gross is below 250, assume you're in that 20% category of what they want you to pay of your income towards the college cost. If you're above 250, that's when the numbers start increasing from 25 to 27 to 30, all the way up to 47%. So the more they make as far as the parents, the more they expect you to pay towards college. That being said, you add these 4 parts together, and that gives you your expected family contribution. Essentially what they think you can pay towards college. Now, that being said, the second form we talked about, the CSS profile, counts all that stuff plus a lot more stuff. If you have to fill out the CSS profile, they will ask you for, your home value when you purchased your home, how much debt you have in your home. They're also going to ask you how much you have in retirement savings. They will even go as far as to ask you if grandma, grandpa, uncles, and aunts are helping out paying for college. The CSS profile is a lot more in-depth, and the reason it's more in-depth is because the schools that use the CSS profile, they use this money to provide grant aid. So they're looking to make sure they're providing the most free money to the students that have the most need. Now, the interesting thing between the FAFSA and the CSS, FAFSA has 80 to 90 questions, depending on how you answer certain questions. Other ones pop up. The CSS profile has 350 questions to 400 questions, and actually go higher than that, depending on which schools require the form, because each school at the end gets to ask you even more questions. Some schools may even ask you what kind of car you drive, what year it is, how much is it worth, is it financed, is it leased. Some schools get very in-depth. So you might be thinking, well, Ed, you talked about early decision before, and you think it's the best time ever to do early decision. But what if we do early decision and we get locked in and we don't know if they're going to give us financial aid? And we don't want to get locked in because maybe we haven't seen a school, and maybe obviously the school costs 70, 80, 85,000, and we don't want to pay that much if they don't give us aid. Very simple. If you're considering doing early decision and you're a little bit nervous because of the price tag, you need to utilize the net price calculators. This is the most important calculator you can use online for parents, families that are looking to do early decision who need financial aid consideration. Every school now has a net price calculator, especially the ones that are doing early decision. Now, the net price calculator is school specific. What that means is you can even just Google it. You can Google Tufts net price calculator, Harvard's net price calculator. You can Google any of them because they all have net price calculators. And the benefit of the net price calculators, and the reason we have this on the screen here from College Board, is because they have an in-depth video on the net price calculators and how they work. The net price calculator will show you specifically based on your income and your assets what that college will give you in grant money. Some schools will even ask you for the student's GPA and test scores on the net price calculator, and then they're also going to show you what kind of scholarship money that school offers, just because they have the index of the scholarships as well as their need-based index put in together with their net price calculator. Now, to give you an example, we actually did, or I guess I did, a net price calculator for Harvard. I basically just went on the Harvard site, did their net price calculator to show you guys essentially what the amounts are for the net price calculator of a family going off to Harvard, a family of 4, with one student going off to college, with the parents having an adjusted gross income of $100,000 with $50,000 of savings. I did all this to show you guys that if you're making $100,000 with $50,000 in assets, as you can see, Harvard cost just under $80,000 last year, basically. So this year it's probably going to be $80,000 and above for these seniors going in and applying. However, with this scenario, you're looking at getting essentially grant money, because even though it says scholarship money, Harvard doesn't provide scholarships, of $65,000 of free aid from Harvard. So the reality is Harvard, if you make $100,000, you have $50,000 in investments outside of retirement, you're looking at a cost of less than $12,000 to attend Harvard. Does everyone see here why I told you guys not to look at the sticker price in the beginning when you're looking at colleges and assuming you can't afford it? If you're looking to do early decision, or if you want to get a better perspective of how generous a college will or will not be towards your family, use the net price calculators. It's the best way of doing this. That being said, let's start talking about some of the frequently made errors that I see on the applications, not just admissions, but also financial aid. Okay? Can everyone hear me? We're still on?
Yep,
We're good.
Now, some of the biggest made errors I see, let's talk admissions first. When it comes to admissions, one of the things you want to make sure, especially from the Girl Scouts perspective, Boy Scouts as well, whether it be the Eagle or the Gold Award, your goal is always to provide them with certain things that no other student can see or no other student can accomplish other than you. And what do I mean by that? Well, when it comes to admissions, admissions is going to tell you right off the bat, we don't care what you did in 8th grade. We don't care what you did in 5th grade. We don't care what you did in 3rd grade. Okay? We care about what you did 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. However, there is an asterisk here, and that asterisk comes with the Gold Award and the Eagle Scout because it doesn't take you 3 years to accomplish the Gold Award, or the Eagle Scout. It takes you decades, years and years and years and years of commitment, which means you want to make sure not only is the Eagle Award or the Gold Award on the top 3 ranking, I would call it, of the activity section of your Common App or any activity or resume you're sending out to them, but you want to also make sure that that individual at the admissions office, your counselor specifically for your region, knows you've gotten an Eagle Award or a Gold Award. Reason being is that some colleges, some high-level colleges, actually have a separate admissions pile just for that category. Now, when it comes to admissions, I'm going to explain this to you kind of in the simplest terms I explain to everybody to admissions and the way it works. Admissions is one giant ocean of small pools, okay? Your goal is to get into the smallest application pool possible, whether it be American Indian, whether it be first generation, whether it be perfect SAT scores, whether it be Gold Award. Your goal is to get into the smallest application pool possible because that limits your competition. Does everyone understand? And having the Gold Award is a lot better than having 1,000 hours of community service, because 1,000 hours of community service can basically manipulate it. Because if you indicate I have 1,000 hours of community service and you have a recommendation from, let's say, a food shelter, or a food bank or a shelter, or so on and so forth, but that organization is run by your parents, what does that 1,000 hours actually mean? The Gold Award shows a tremendous amount of consistency. So you want to make sure that they realize that you're a gold recipient or you're somebody on track to get it, whether you've already been board approved or whether you're in the process of getting board approved. You want to notify them that I'm in the process of getting or I have gotten the Gold Award. That's from the admissions point of view. Now, from a financial point of view, when it comes to financial, on the financial side of it, from the error side, the biggest errors are always the social, the birthday. Those are the biggest errors done across the board on not just the admissions paperwork and financial aid paperwork, but both. And this is what I mean by both. Student fills out all the Common App information. They fill it out either by not submitting their social or putting the wrong social or putting their nickname. And then the parents fill out the financial aid paperwork with the proper Social Security name, the proper Social Security number, and the two never match up, okay? No nicknames on anything, especially when they ask you for your first and last name. And by the way, your middle name is irrelevant. Whether you put it down or not, doesn't matter. Second, always have parents and students double check everything. Names, socials, birthdays specifically. Those are the big areas that delay everything. The reality is, in the world of financial aid and admissions, everything can be wrong, but your first name, last name, and social. Those are right. Your address, your phone number, your email can all be wrong. Everything can be wrong except for those 3 things, okay? Now, another big error I see on the financial side is if you have an older student living at home. Let's say you have a student who's come back home. They graduated college or they graduated grad school, and they're at home, whether it be because if they can't find work or COVID or whatever. And you're thinking to yourself, well, they're 22 years old, they live in a home, but they're working, so I don't count them on the FAFSA or the CSS profile. Incorrect. You count anyone in your household who is a child up until the age of 24. This is a big error in the world of financial aid when it comes to the forms. Because when it comes to calculating financial aid, they're going to ask you 3 very important questions about your home. Number 1, household size. How many people in the household? Number 2, second question I'm going to ask you, how many people on your tax return, the exemptions? And the third question I'm going to ask you on the financial aid forms about the household and everything else, the third important question, how many people in college? The interesting thing is the amount of people in your household is the most important. The second most important, how many people in college? The third least important is how many people on your taxes. So if you're divorced and you're doing separate taxes and they claim them one year and you claim the other year and you're wondering, should I claim all the students because they're claiming 1 or 2 students, you claim all of them on the financial aid forms. Do you understand? Household size is very important. The bigger the household size, the lower amount you have to pay towards college. The lower the household size, the more you have to pay. Your goal is always to minimize the amount you're looking to pay, or I guess on paper they're looking for you to pay. Okay? Now that being said, let's go back to admissions for a minute. When it comes to social media, this is make or break for a lot of students. And this year it's going to be like on steroids because there's so many teenagers at home with absolutely nothing to do. And what I mean by that is every year you hear some story in the news about 20 students who got accepted to Harvard and then they liked or said something stupid on Facebook and they all got rejected. This happens every year. And it's not just after you get accepted. If you have a Snapchat, a Facebook, a TikTok, or whatever, and you have something on there that mom and dad don't think is a good idea, or your guidance counselor doesn't think is a good idea, or it's something that's borderline funny to you and your friends, but might either alienate anybody, take it off, make it private, or just shut down the entire account. Admissions officers are going on these accounts because you have to think about it this way. This year, there's going to be a limited amount of information to be accepted to the college. The things that are out there are the classes taken and the GPA. What's not out there? We've eliminated the SAT. What else has been eliminated? Extracurricular activities, sports, clubs, community service have all been eliminated. You don't want to give them a reason to reject you because you either put something on your social media page that you and your friends find hilarious, which somebody might take the wrong way. If you don't want to take it down, perfectly fine, but make it private. Because if you leave it public, I guarantee you they're going on there. That's just another reason to reject you. And then what you think is funny now at 16, 17, and 18, you're probably not going to think it's funny at 30, 35, and 40. Okay? That being said, on the screen now, you're going to see Cornell. I love using Cornell. I think I've used them for 20 plus years for another reason why I indicate to parents that you should never look at the price tag of the college in determining whether or not to apply. Let's say you fill out all the forms, and the forms say you can pay $10,000 based on your income, assets, and everything else, which means your financial need at going to Cornell is $67,000 plus, which means at Cornell, being one of the schools that I mentioned before is extremely generous, they actually meet 100% of need, Cornell is going to give you $67,000 in grant money. Why is it so important? Because I have parents almost on a daily basis that call me and ask me questions to go over their college list, and they're always shocked when I say to them that the state schools you're considering, the ones that cost $20,000, $25,000, and $30,000 that you think you're saving money on, are probably going to be the more expensive schools on your list because once you hit a family contribution of $10,000, you've already hit the threshold of federal aid and state aid, which means these schools probably can't give you financial aid assistance, the grant monies, the free monies to help you reduce the cost. Where the private colleges, the more elite colleges, the more expensive colleges usually have huge endowments and can help out. So how do we find out the schools are 100% need-based? Very simple. Take your college list, plug in every single school on the College Board, pull up their profiles. On each one of their profiles on College Board, they have a financial aid tab. Click on the financial aid tab. That will show you how generous that college is. And also do, as I mentioned before, their net price calculator, see exactly what they're going to offer you. So there are ways of doing research, whether you've been accepted, whether you even applied to the college, to know ahead of time if the school is going to provide you aid or not. That being said, the next level, I guess the next time you would be appealing is when you receive the award letter. So you're already talking to admissions about scholarship money and trying to find every which way to get more. If I get better grades, if I have a higher rigor to my schedule, so on and so forth. The next level of starting to appeal starts when you start getting accepted to the colleges, as well as start getting other colleges' award letters. You always, in many cases, want to appeal a scholarship. A scholarship, I'd say you probably appeal 100% of the time. What you don't appeal 100% of the time is grant money. For those who are wondering, I also have about 25 videos on YouTube to cover these other topics specifically. So there's 3 reasons. I'm going to go over the 3 reasons that you may or may not want to appeal. Because there's 3 things that happen when you appeal. I have a video that's about 20 minutes long about how to appeal properly on YouTube. The first thing that happens if you appeal is you get more money. The second thing that happens if you appeal is you get no money. And most people think that's the only 2 things that happen. That's not the only 2 things that happen. The third thing can happen. The school can take away money if you appeal and you do it incorrectly. Reason being is this. When you guys send in financial aid paperwork, the FAFSA, the CSS, and everything else you can send in, there's no human being calculating your financial aid eligibility. There's no one creating your reward letter. It's done by a machine, which means the machine might not pick up something. If you appeal and say to the school, because I hear all these people saying you always appeal, which is terrible advice. If you appeal and the college's financial aid officer sees something on your tax return or your appeal statement that you write up saying why you want more money, or within your financial aid documents that they find odd and they start asking you questions, that means they think that something is wrong here. You're probably going to lose financial aid. Because when a human being steps in, then they start looking at your taxes. They start looking at the interest on your taxes, the dividends on your taxes, capital gains. Maybe you forgot to put in the rental income. Maybe you forgot to tell us that one parent was making more than the other parent, things that the machine is not going to catch. I have seen students lose financial aid because they're appealing when they should not be appealing on the grant side. On the scholarship side, they're not going to take away the scholarship. So if you want to say to the school, you've offered us a $10,000 scholarship, school B, our second choice, is giving us a $20,000 scholarship, what can you do? Can you match it? That's perfectly fine. But to go in there without looking at your numbers and researching it, or at least watching my video, because I cover the entire aspect of why I would not appeal and why I would appeal, if you feel comfortable then appealing the grant money, then you're fine. Because I have seen parents go from they had $20,000 in grant money to no grant money. So I've seen devastations based on the fact that just taking a broad approach to appealing. Does everyone understand? Okay, good. That being said, let me go back to appeal for one more thing. If you do appeal the financial aid office and they do increase your work study, that's one of the tactics. I don't want to say it in a negative way because I used to be in financial aid, so it's not a bad thing they're doing. If they increase just the work study, I would reappeal and indicate to them that we appreciate the extra work study, but we're looking for more grant money or scholarship money specifically to reduce the bill, not provide more work for our student because they're going there to go to college, not to start a career, i.e. a work program, okay? Now, I do have a newsletter. I guess the company, organization does have a newsletter that goes out every month. If you guys want the newsletter, it goes out each month. You guys can just email me. You email me basically the high school you're going to and your grade level, and then I just email you the newsletter every month. It goes out. The newsletter tells you specifically what you need to do every single month, and it's grade specific. That's why I need you, if you email me and say, Ed, we'd like the newsletter, I just need to know what grade level your student is in. That being said, this is our contact information. This is our website, my email, my phone number, so on and so forth. If you guys need help or assistance, so on and so forth, I'm available. I help out with pretty much everything from essays, financial aid forms, so on and so forth, consultations, so on and so forth. If you guys need help kind of figuring out where you are. But the reality is, most of you don't need a college advisor. Many families I talk to really only need somebody to talk to for like an hour and you're done. Most schools, to give you an example, most public universities, the big schools, I don't want to give a general terminology, but most of them don't care what your essay says. I'm just going to be blatantly honest. Most of them care about what classes you're taking, GPA, and test scores, because they only have somewhere between 6 to 10 admissions officers. So if they're getting 80,000 applications, they're not reading your essay unless you're on the cusp of the cusp. So to pay someone to work on an essay for you, thousands of dollars I've seen in some cases, for an essay that's never going to get read, doesn't make any sense. You kind of have to weigh your options and utilize your resources where the best sources are. That being said, as I mentioned before, we do have a YouTube channel. If you just go to YouTube and just type in Ed Zamora, our videos pop up. We have 25 videos. The only thing I ask everyone who watched the video tonight, or I guess who's on the call tonight, the best way you can help our organization, if you don't have to call me instead of a meeting, if you want to, it's fine. But the best way to help us out is go to our YouTube channel, hit the subscription button, and then when you go to the channel, it's going to be a play all button. Just click the play all button and just let all our videos play. You don't even have to watch the video. I don't care if you do watch the video, to be honest with you. But it's the way that YouTube monetizes us, is that the more people that watch us for a longer time period, the better it is for us. So if you click the play all button and then just open up another tab and do whatever else you want to do, watch another video on YouTube, it doesn't matter. Just hit the play all button on YouTube and watch all the videos, whether you put it in a different tab or, put it on the side so you can't see it. That's all I ask if you guys can help us out. Okay? Does anyone have any questions?
I have another question.
Sure.
So the example that you gave looking at filling out the FAFSA form is a family making $100,000. We've been filling out the Common App, or my son and daughter have. I'm kind of peeking over their shoulder. And the one question they asked us is, are we going to be applying for needs-based financial aid? That's one of the questions in the Common App.
The way
Does it impact, if I don't think that we're going to qualify for anything needs-based, does it make them a more attractive candidate to the school to say no?
Yes and no. It's a good question. The question that's been brought up is, on the Common App, when you go into the My College section, which is school-specific, each school is going to ask you, are you applying for need-based aid? Now, there's two ways to handle this question. The first way is fill out the net price calculator of the college. Let's say the school costs $70,000. This is a number. And you fill out the net price calculator. And based on your income, the net price calculator comes back and says, you can pay $100,000 towards college. Then I'm just indicating I'm not applying for need-based aid because you already know you're not eligible for need-based aid, which helps out on two sides. Because the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call the school's admissions office up and ask them, is your school need aware? It's a very important term to use. The reason you're asking the school, are they need aware, is because if they say, yes, we are need aware, what that basically says is this school is looking at you from a financial component as to be able to be accepted here. Now, doesn't have as much weight, the financial side, as the class schedule, the GPA, SAT scores, etc. But it is a component if they say yes. Now, there are some schools that, I don't want to say are hiding it, but in a sense are hiding that they're need aware. But the way I look at it is this. If the school costs $80,000 and we can't afford $80,000, and I've done the net price calculator, and it says to me, I'm going to get half off or maybe more off, then I'm going to indicate, yes, I'm applying for need-based aid. Because the reality is, if your student doesn't get accepted based on a need component, the school's not going to say to you, we didn't accept your student because you couldn't afford it. You have no idea why the school rejected your student, good, bad, or indifferent. But for me, if I need financial aid, I'm saying, yes, I'm applying for financial aid. But first, I'm checking with a net price calculator to see if I have need available. And second, I'm checking with the school to see if they're need aware. If it's beneficial to apply for aid, I'm applying for it. If I need it, I'm going to apply for it. That's kind of the way of looking at it. Also, another reason is because some schools are going to tell you, if you say, no, I'm not applying the first year, they will bar you from applying for 2 years. So if you're looking at it from the perspective of, let me get in by saying I can pay for it and then get aid year 2, they may bar you from getting aid year 2 as well. Okay, no problem. Any other questions?
I have one, Ed, because I know one of my favorite videos, because your videos are great. You have one about 7 reasons why you should always take a federal direct loan.
Yes.
And I know we didn't really cover that as a component of this, but it is an interesting reason as to why. So even if on your Common App you say I'm not financial need based, but later on you fill out the FAFSA and you maybe go down the road of a federal direct loan, or later on you get a grant because you're working on some special project or your situation changes. Like, aren't those all good reasons to do the FAFSA?
For me, I tell students all the time, even if you say on the Common App, I am not applying for need-based aid, If you indicate on the FAFSA I'm not applying for need-based aid, I'm doing the FAFSA in like March or April. And the only reason I'm doing the FAFSA in March and April later is because if they ask you why you do the FAFSA later on, I'm saying to them because I'm applying for federal loans, which are not a need-based component they care about. Another reason I'm doing the FAFSA no matter what later on is because if something happens financially, I want to be covered. And the FAFSA form takes anywhere later on in the school year, typically let's say May, June, July timeframe. If I have to do the FAFSA later on for whatever reason for an appeal, it could take anywhere from a week to 2 weeks for them to get the FAFSA. If I have the FAFSA in place already, the CSS profile, if they need a CSS, the minute I fill out the CSS and complete it and submit it, they see it instantly. So my appeal can go through instantly quickly. To give you an example, I had a student who parents lost their jobs in September. This was like a decade ago. And we did an appeal on December 20th. This was for Gettysburg. On December 20th, we did an appeal. The FAFSA was already in. We filled out the CSS. They got back to us on December 22nd because both parents lost their jobs and because they were paying full freight before, their entire spring semester was free. But it only happened because the FAFSA was already completed. We had 2 days to get this done, basically 48 hours. They came back with a full tuition spring aid because the FAFSA was done. If the FAFSA wasn't done, impossible. Once they go on winter break, no one's answering your phone call till like January 5th. Now, the interesting thing is too, I also like looking at the federal loans for a couple reasons. Number one, it's got the lowest credit, there's no credit requirement for the student loans. So your students automatically offered $5,500 their first year, the freshman year. The benefit of that is typically $3,500 of the $5,500 loan is interest-free the entire time they're in college, and they have a 6-month grace period before any interest starts. The $2,000 that does have an interest rate this year is at 2.75%. You're not going to find any student loans out there that low. There are a few, but you need an 800 credit score, and they're usually still around the 2 level anyways. But the other benefit of the federal direct loans is they're in the student's name, which does a couple things. Number one, a lot of families will say to the student, we're going to take out the federal loans, the first year $5,500, the second year $6,500, and years 3 and 4, we're going to get $7,500 each year. We're going to have you take out those loans. And if you do well academically, let's say a 3.5 or higher, you make the dean's list, we as your parents will pay for them. Or if you graduate school within the 4-year time frame and don't cost me more money by going into the traditional now 5-year period, we're going to pay off the loans. Or you graduate and you get a job and you move out, we're going to pay the loans. You know, there's benefits there that you can kind of like, the carrot above the donkey type scenario. But another reason I like it is because let's say you're thinking, I don't want my student to have any debt, which is understandable. Some parents want to go that way. I still would probably take out the federal direct loans. If I'm getting the subsidized portion, the $3,500 free interest loan, because if you take out just the interest-free loan every year, and then after the 4 years is up, if you pay off that loan before the 6-month grace period they're giving after graduation, there is no interest incurred, and it shows that the student had paid off the loan, so it increases, essentially establishes their credit history. So there's many vehicles to use for why I would take out the loans. But if I'm getting $3,500 interest-free for 4.5 years, and I can pay you back in 4.5 years without paying any interest, you could basically take the same amount of money, $3,500, put it in the bank, leave it for 4.5 years. Obviously, you're getting like 1%, but you're still making money on that money, where the government's basically just giving you that money interest-free. So there's a lot of benefits to it, plus a 2.75% interest, on top of the fact that the Federal Reserve came out, I think it was 4 months ago, and said they're not going to raise interest rates for the next 2 years anyways. You're probably going to be at a 2.75 or maybe lower for the next 2 years. I'm probably definitely taking the loan out. And you can also pay it back anytime. There's no pre-penalty. Right. Any other questions, guys?
Anybody?
No, we're good to go. All right, guys.
So much, Ed. I appreciate it. I'll make sure everybody has your contact information too, and we really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great job.
Thanks, Ed.